She covered her aunt's cleaning shift, but never expected the millionaire guest's shocking offer. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, She Covered Her Aunt's Cleaning Shift but Never Expected the Millionaire Guest's Shocking Offer. Now, let us return to our main character. Her name is Emma. Emma was 25 years old and living in a small town just outside of Seattle. She worked part-time at a local bookstore while trying to save money for graduate school. Emma had always been a quiet, practical girl who believed in hard work. Her family never had much, but they valued honesty and kindness more than anything else. Her aunt, Caroline, worked as a cleaner at one of the most luxurious five-star hotels in the city. Caroline had been there for years, quietly mopping floors and dusting chandeliers without complaint. On that particular Friday, Caroline woke up with a fever and could barely stand. She called Emma and asked for a favor she rarely asked anyone. "Sweetheart," her voice cracked through the phone, "can you cover my shift just for tonight? If I miss this one, they might cut my hours next month." Emma hesitated. She had plans to work on her scholarship essay. But when she thought about how hard her aunt had worked all her life, the answer came easily. She said yes. By 6 in the evening, Emma stood in the staff locker room of the hotel. The crisp white uniform hung awkwardly on her shoulders, and the black rubber shoes felt strange on her feet. She tied her hair up, tucked the cleaning gloves into her apron pocket, and took a deep breath before stepping into the grand marble hallway. Everything around her looked expensive. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars. The golden railings shone like they were polished every hour. Guests walked past her wearing designer suits, expensive perfumes trailing in the air. Emma felt small, invisible, like a tiny dot in a glittering world that was not hers. She pushed the cleaning cart to the 12th floor, where her aunt was assigned that night. Everything seemed normal at first. The hallway was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. She cleaned a few rooms, changed some sheets, and wiped mirrors. It was not glamorous, but Emma felt proud she could help her aunt. Then, just as she was about to finish restocking the linen closet, a door on the far end of the hallway opened with a loud click. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a black tailored suit that looked like it cost more than everything Emma owned combined. He had sharp, confident features and a look that could silence a room. She froze. He was clearly not just another guest. She had seen faces like his only on magazine covers. In fact, she recognized him from a news segment that played on the store television last week. His name was Alexander Grant, a self-made millionaire in his early 30s, known for buying failing tech companies and turning them into gold. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind of man who walked into a room and shifted the air. Emma lowered her eyes quickly, trying to look busy with the cart, but his voice was calm, smooth, and impossible to ignore. "You are not the usual cleaner," he said, his deep voice echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. Her heart jumped. "No, sir," she managed to reply softly. "I'm just covering my aunt's shift tonight." He looked at her for a moment, longer than she was comfortable with. It was not the kind of look men gave her in everyday life. There was something assessing in it, like he was studying every detail. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, even though the air was warm. Then he said something she did not expect. "Good. I have been waiting for someone different tonight." Her grip tightened on the handle of the cleaning cart. The words hung in the air, too heavy, too strange. She forced a polite smile and turned her eyes away. She did not belong in his world. People like him were distant, untouchable. But Alexander Grant had already made a mental note of her. Something about the way she stood there, nervous, honest, completely unaware of her quiet beauty, caught his attention. He was used to being surrounded by people who wanted something from him. But this woman, this cleaner who did not even want to meet his eyes, felt different. Emma had no idea that this simple act, saying yes to covering her aunt's shift, was about to lead her into the most unexpected night of her life. And it would all begin with the man standing across the hallway, the man whose offer would turn her quiet, predictable world upside down. Emma pushed the cleaning cart down the hallway, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling left by Alexander Grant's unexpected attention. She reminded herself that this was just one night. She would finish this shift, go home, and everything would return to normal. This was not her world. She was only here to help her aunt. The 12th floor was quiet again. The carpet softened the sound of her footsteps. Through the windows at the end of the corridor, the night sky over Seattle stretched wide, scattered with distant lights from the city below. Emma had always liked looking at city lights. They made her feel small, but not in a bad way. It reminded her that the world was big, and her current struggles were only one chapter in a much bigger story. She opened the door to the supply room and began to refill her cart with towels, bottled water, and cleaning solutions. Everything about this job was ordinary, but tonight did not feel ordinary. The moment Alexander Grant had spoken to her, something in the air had changed. She could not stop hearing his voice in her head. It was deep and calm, but carried a quiet kind of power. It was the voice of someone who was used to being listened to. Emma shook her head. She had no business thinking about a man like him. He was rich, powerful, and untouchable. She was just a woman covering a cleaning shift. Nothing would come out of this. As she stepped out of the supply room, the elevator at the far end opened with a soft chime. 2 hotel staff members came out, whispering to each other and glancing nervously in her direction. One of them, a woman about her age with her hair tied tightly in a bun, gave Emma a curious look. "You are not the usual cleaner," she said. "No," Emma answered politely. "I am covering for my aunt tonight." The woman nodded slowly. "Be careful around the man in Suite 1208. He owns a lot of things around here. People say he can buy whatever he wants, including silence." Emma's heart tightened slightly, but she forced a smile. "I will just clean and leave. No trouble." The woman gave her a look that lingered a second longer than normal before walking away with her coworker. Emma exhaled slowly. She did not need any drama. She just wanted to finish the shift and go home to her small apartment with its warm lamp and quiet corners. She continued with her tasks, moving from room to room. She wiped bathroom counters, vacuumed rugs, and replaced trash bags. It was repetitive work, but she did it carefully. Her Aunt Caroline always said, "It does not matter if you are cleaning a palace or a small diner. If you do it with dignity, the work matters." Emma carried that in her heart. At around 9:30, she reached the far end of the hallway. Room 1208, Suite 1208. She hesitated for a moment. The door was slightly open, just enough for a line of golden light to spill out onto the carpet. Emma glanced at the clipboard. Her aunt had marked it as a routine cleaning stop. Normally, guests would be out at dinner at this hour. She took a quiet breath and knocked gently. "Housekeeping," she said softly. A familiar voice came from inside. "Come in." Her fingers tightened on the handle. She pushed the door open slowly. The suite was stunning. Warm lighting poured over polished wood floors. A fireplace flickered at the far end, throwing shadows on cream-colored walls. Expensive artwork hung above the leather couch. A tray of untouched room service sat on the table, still steaming. Alexander Grant stood by the window, looking out at the city. His suit jacket was off, and the white dress shirt beneath it was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms. His presence filled the room without effort. He turned his head slightly when she entered. "You came," he said calmly. Emma lowered her eyes and pushed the cart in. "I am just here to clean, sir." He watched her for a moment before stepping closer. "Relax. I'm not going to bite. You look like you are holding your breath." Emma forced herself to inhale. Her hands trembled slightly as she began gathering the empty glasses from the coffee table. She tried to keep her focus on the task, but she could feel his gaze on her like a weight she could not shake off. Alexander sat down on the couch, watching her every move with quiet interest. He was used to people trying to impress him, trying to win his attention, but she did not even look at him. She just cleaned, carefully, nervously, like she wanted to disappear. That made her stand out more than anyone else could. "Most people talk too much around me," he said after a long silence. "You do not." She kept her voice even. "I do not have anything to say." He tilted his head slightly. "I like that." Emma did not respond. She finished wiping the coffee table and moved toward the fireplace, trying to keep a polite distance. The warmth from the fire brushed against her skin, but the real heat in the room came from the way his eyes followed her. She hated how aware she was of every step, every breath. She could feel something shifting, even if she could not explain it. What started as an ordinary cleaning job was turning into something else, something heavier, something she was not prepared for. As she reached for the last glass on the shelf, Alexander's voice came again, calm but firm. "Emma, is it?" Her breath caught. She had not told him her name. "Yes," she whispered. He leaned back slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Good. I like to know the name of the woman I am about to make a very unexpected offer to." For a moment, the world seemed to narrow around her. The soft crackle of the fireplace, the glow of the city lights, the quiet of the 12th floor, everything blurred except for his voice. She had walked into this night as a cleaner, but something was beginning to change, and she could feel it in the way her heart pounded against her rib. Emma's fingers stiffened around the glass she was holding. His words lingered in the air like a spark waiting to set something on fire. She slowly placed the glass back on the tray and turned to face him. Alexander Grant was no longer just the distant figure she had seen in news segments or magazine articles. He was sitting right in front of her, looking at her as if he already had a decision in mind. She swallowed. "What do you mean by an offer?" Alexander leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was calm, deliberate, and steady in a way that made people listen. "I do not waste words, Emma. I need something specific, and I believe you are exactly the kind of person who could help me." She let out a nervous breath. "I do not understand." He gave a small, quiet laugh. "I do not expect you to. Not yet." The room fell into a long silence. Emma could hear the faint hum of the heating system and the soft crackle of the fireplace. Outside the tall windows, the lights of downtown Seattle shimmered like scattered stars. She felt like she had stepped into a world where everything was polished and expensive, a world where people like her did not belong. Alexander stood up slowly. He was taller than she had imagined, and the way he carried himself made the air around him feel heavier. He walked toward the large window and looked out at the city. "I am not someone who believes in coincidences. I have built my entire life on strategy and precision, but tonight, when I saw you, something told me this was the right moment." Emma felt the weight of his words pressing against her chest. "I am just covering my aunt's shift. I am not sure what I could possibly offer someone like you." He turned back to her, his eyes steady. "Honesty," he said simply. "That is something money cannot buy." Emma's breath hitched slightly. She was not sure if this was some kind of game or if he was being serious. His expression was unreadable, controlled, but not cold. It was the look of a man who was calculating, but also certain. Alexander walked closer until the distance between them was only a few feet. "I am not asking for anything illegal or dangerous," he said. "I need someone I can trust for something unconventional, someone who has nothing to gain or lose by telling me the truth." Her heart raced. "Why me?" He gave a small, knowing smile. "Because you looked at me like I was just another man in a suit. Do you know how rare that is?" She did not have an answer. She wanted to step back, but her feet would not move. She had spent most of her life avoiding complicated situations, staying quiet, keeping her head down. But now, for the first time, she was at the center of something she could not define. Alexander picked up a folder from the table beside him. It was thick, filled with documents neatly organized. He held it out toward her. "I need someone to play a role that will last 30 days. After that, you can walk away, and your life can go back to exactly how it was." Emma stared at the folder without taking it. "What kind of role?" "A contract," he said simply. "A marriage contract." The word slammed into her like a sudden gust of cold air. Her throat tightened. "A what?" "A marriage contract," he repeated calmly. "I need a wife on paper, not forever, not even for love, just for a very specific reason, and I will make sure you are compensated more than fairly for it." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The idea sounded absurd. She was a cleaner for the night, not someone who belonged in marriage contracts with men who could buy entire hotels. She shook her head slightly. This must be some kind of joke. Alexander did not flinch. "I do not joke about business." "Yeah." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but there was none. He stood there like a man used to having his plans carried out exactly as he wanted. Emma forced herself to speak, her voice trembling. "Why would a man like you need something like this?" His jaw tightened just a little, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his expression. "Because sometimes power is not about what you have. It is about what people believe you have. There are negotiations happening right now that require a personal image I do not currently have. I need to be married, on paper, temporarily, and I do not want anyone from my world to play that part." Her stomach nodded. "So you chose a random cleaner?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "I chose someone who has no reason to betray me. Someone real. Emma's chest rose and fell as she tried to process his words. The whole thing sounded impossible. Unreal. Yet the man in front of her was not playing a game. He was serious, and that was what frightened her most. He placed the folder on the table between them. Inside is everything. A clear contract, legal, clean, 30 days, no obligations beyond what is written. You will have a place to stay. You will be paid well, and at the end, you can walk away without ever seeing me again if you choose. Her fingers hovered above the folder but did not touch it. She felt as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward could change everything. Alexander's voice softened slightly, but it carried weight. Emma, I am offering you a choice. Nothing will happen if you say no, but if you say yes, your life will not look the same 30 days from now. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint crackle of the fire. Emma stared at the folder, then at him. She had always lived a quiet, careful life. This was not something quiet or careful. This was the kind of moment people read about in stories, not the kind they lived through. But she was living through it now, and Alexander Grant was waiting for her answer. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at the folder as if it could burn her fingers if she touched it. The world around her seemed to shrink. The flickering firelight painted soft gold on the walls, but inside her chest, everything felt tight and unsteady. A marriage contract, 30 days, a stranger, a billionaire. It made no sense. And yet every word Alexander Grant had spoken had been steady and deliberate. He was not playing. She forced herself to breathe slowly, trying to clear the fog in her mind. You do not even know me, she finally said. Her voice was quiet, almost shaking. Alexander's eyes never wavered. I know enough, he replied. I know that you are not from my world, which makes you the safest choice. I know that you are not here for money, because if you were, you would not be wearing a hotel cleaning uniform. And I know that you looked at me like I was just another man. That is all I need to know. She folded her arms unconsciously, as if trying to protect herself. This is insane, she whispered. He gave a slight nod. It might be, but it is also real. I am offering you something that is entirely your choice. No tricks, no pressure. If you walk out that door, this conversation disappears. The calmness in his voice unsettled her more than any loud demand could have. Emma looked at the folder again. She had spent most of her life living cautiously, making small, safe choices. But what if one wild decision could change everything? I need time, she said. Alexander stepped closer, but not too close. Of course, but time is not unlimited. The contract has to be signed before Sunday night. Emma's chest tightened. It was Friday. That gave her 48 hours to make a decision that could rewrite the course of her life. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white business card, placing it carefully on the table beside the folder. This is my number. If you decide to walk away, I will understand. If you decide to call, I will be waiting. She stared at the card, at the neat black letters spelling out his name. Everything about him radiated control and quiet power. Alexander glanced at her one last time, then turned toward the door. His voice was steady, almost soft. Think carefully, Emma. Choices like this do not come twice. The door clicked shut behind him. Emma stood there alone, surrounded by polished walls and soft light, with nothing but a folder and a business card on the table. For the first time in her life, she realized that a single decision could lead her somewhere she had never imagined, and the clock had already started ticking. Emma walked out of the hotel with the folder pressed against her chest, as if it might slip away if she loosened her grip. The cool night air of Seattle wrapped around her, sharp against her warm skin. The streets were quiet, only the sound of distant traffic humming softly. She could still hear Alexander Grant's voice in her head. Choices like this do not come twice. She waited at the bus stop, staring at the glowing streetlights, but her thoughts were spinning too fast to notice anything around her. She had always lived a careful life. She worked part-time, helped her aunt, paid her bills on time, and saved every spare dollar. Nothing in her world had ever looked like this folder. When she got home to her small apartment, she placed the folder on the kitchen table and just stared at it. The lamp above the counter cast a pale yellow light on the smooth cover. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Everything inside was real. There were legal documents, signatures from Alexander's attorney, clauses, terms, payment details, and even a specific end date. She leaned back in her chair, heart racing. It was not a fantasy. It was a real offer, a contract marriage with a man whose face appeared on the front page of business magazines. The thought of saying yes terrified her, but the thought of saying no left an empty ache in her chest she could not quite explain. She was tired of living a life where nothing ever changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from her aunt, asking how the shift went. Emma stared at the screen for a long moment and typed a simple reply. "It was fine. I will tell you tomorrow." She closed the folder and pressed her palms against the cover. The city outside was silent, but inside her chest, everything was loud. She knew this was no longer just an unusual night. This was the beginning of something bigger, something she could not walk away from without thinking twice. And Sunday was already closing in. Saturday arrived with a pale gray sky hanging low over the city. Emma sat at the small table in her kitchen, the folder open in front of her once again. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Alexander Grant's voice, calm and steady, offering her something she could not fully comprehend. She read through the contract carefully for the third time. Everything was clear, written in clean legal language. 30 days. A public marriage that would begin with a quiet civil ceremony, a temporary residence at his estate outside the city, a private driver, a legal team, a fixed end date, generous compensation, no personal obligations beyond public appearances and maintaining the illusion of a marriage. It was all there in black and white. Her stomach twisted as she ran her fingers across the signature line. This was not a fairy tale. This was a business arrangement with a man whose entire life operated like a chessboard. A soft knock pulled her attention away from the paper. Her Aunt Caroline opened the door slowly, carrying a warm bag of groceries. "I brought you some soup," she said with a tired smile. Emma quickly closed the folder and forced a smile. "Thank you, Aunt Caroline. How are you feeling?" "Better," her aunt said as she sat down. "I hope the shift last night was not too hard on you." Emma hesitated for a heartbeat. She wanted to say everything. She wanted to tell her aunt about the billionaire in the hallway, the offer, the contract, the impossible choice sitting on her kitchen table, but the words would not come out. Her aunt had already spent her life working to keep their family afloat. Emma did not want to worry her. "It was fine," Emma finally said softly. Caroline reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You have always been a good girl. I know life has not been easy, but good things come when you least expect them. Do not be afraid of change when it shows up at your door." The words hit Emma harder than she expected. Her aunt had no idea what kind of change was standing at her door right now. After her aunt left, the apartment felt too quiet. Emma stood at the window, watching raindrops streak down the glass. Her heart thudded unevenly. She had spent years building a careful, ordinary life. But this offer was not ordinary. She picked up the business card from the table, Alexander Grant. The name alone carried a kind of weight she could not explain. Emma exhaled slowly and reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered above the numbers. She knew that if she called, everything would shift. She also knew that if she walked away, she would never stop wondering what might have happened. And then, almost without realizing it, she pressed the call button. The line rang once before his voice came through, calm and unshaken. "Emma," just hearing him say her name made her pulse spike. "I have read everything," she said quietly. There was a pause, then his voice again. "And?" She stared at the rain falling harder against the window. Her decision had already been made the moment she picked up the phone. "I will sign," she whispered. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a held breath. Then his voice softened. "Good. Tomorrow morning at 10. I will send a car." The call ended. Emma lowered the phone slowly, realizing that her quiet, ordinary life had just taken a sharp turn into something she could not fully control. Sunday morning arrived with a soft drizzle that coated the streets of Seattle in a silver haze. Emma stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the simple cream-colored dress she had chosen the night before. It was not extravagant, just clean and neat, the kind of dress she could wear to any formal appointment. But today was not an ordinary appointment. Today, she was going to sign a marriage contract with a man she barely knew. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black car pulled up in front of her building. The driver, dressed in a sharp black suit, stepped out and opened the door for her without a word. The ride to the courthouse felt unreal. The city blurred past the window, and Emma's hands rested on her lap, cold and tense. When they arrived, Alexander Grant was already waiting. He wore a dark gray suit, his posture perfectly composed. He did not smile, but the way he looked at her carried a quiet certainty. She felt like he had planned every step of this moment long before she entered his life. Inside a private office at the courthouse, everything was ready. 2 lawyers, a witness, and the papers she had read over and over again. Her signature was the last piece. She picked up the pen slowly, her hand trembling just enough for her to feel it. She looked at Alexander. His eyes did not waver. "You still have time to walk away," he said evenly. Emma inhaled softly. "No," she whispered. "I made my choice." With one steady movement, she signed her name on the dotted line. The pen glided smoothly across the paper, sealing something she still could not fully name. The lawyer confirmed the signatures, stamped the document, and handed them each a copy. Just like that, in less than 30 minutes, Emma went from being a cleaner covering a night shift to the legal wife of a millionaire. As they stepped out into the damp air, Alexander looked at her and said quietly, "From this moment on, your world will not look the same." She believed him, because in her heart, she already felt the weight of it. The ride to Alexander Grant's estate was quiet, except for the soft hum of the tires on the wet pavement. Emma sat in the back seat, holding the folded copy of the marriage contract in her lap. Rain streaked across the car window, blurring the world outside. She tried to calm the storm inside her chest, but nothing felt familiar anymore. She was no longer just Emma, the woman who worked at a bookstore and helped her aunt. She was now, at least on paper, the wife of a man who lived in a world built on power and precision. The black car turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway. The estate came into view like something out of another life. A modern mansion stood at the top of a gentle hill, its glass walls reflecting the silver sky. Landscaped gardens stretched out around it, and the quiet was almost unsettling. When the car stopped, a member of Alexander's staff opened the door for her. She stepped out slowly, her shoes pressing against the damp stones of the driveway. Alexander was already standing at the entrance, hands in his pockets, watching her with the same calm focus he had carried since the night they met. "Welcome," he said simply. Emma looked up at the house, then back at him. "It is bigger than I imagined." It is just a house," he replied. "But for the next 30 days, it is yours too." His words carried no warmth, but also no coldness. It was matter of fact, like everything about him. He led her inside, where everything gleamed with quiet elegance. High ceilings, warm lighting, and the soft scent of polished wood filled the space. Alexander turned to her once they reached the main hall. "You do not have to pretend anything when we are alone. This is a contract, not a performance inside these walls. But outside, it is different. Outside, we are a married couple." Emma nodded slowly, trying to steady her breath. She felt the weight of the new world around her pressing in. This was no longer a distant possibility. It was her reality. In that moment, standing in the grand hall of Alexander Grant's world, Emma realized there was no turning back. The 30 days had officially begun. The first night in Alexander Grant's estate felt like standing on the edge of a new world. Emma sat by the large window in her new room, looking out at the gardens washed by soft rain. The house was silent, but her thoughts were loud. Just a few nights ago, she was cleaning hotel rooms, invisible to everyone who walked past her. Now, she was living under the same roof as a man whose name carried power. On the table beside her lay the marriage contract, folded neatly, its clean black letters staring back like a quiet reminder. 30 days. It was supposed to be simple, no strings, no emotions. Just an arrangement. But Emma could already feel that nothing about this would be simple. Downstairs, Alexander walked through the hallway, stopping for a moment near the staircase. His world had always been predictable, controlled, and calculated. But tonight felt different. He did not believe in coincidences, yet something about her had made him choose differently. Their paths, once strangers, were now bound together by ink on paper. Neither of them could predict where those 30 days would lead. As Emma watched the rain slide down the glass, a quiet thought settled inside her. One choice had changed everything, and this was only the beginning.